Creative nonfiction piece is the author's reflection of the Women's March on Washington and the intersectionality that made a march of such magnitude possible. She starts out by painting a picture of the march's diverse participants parading together in the first highlighted section. Then, in the second highlighted section, she breaks down the diverse reasons for those participants to support such a demonstration. Tolentino even quotes a young girl in the third highlighted section, as can be seen here. She quotes a young girl who seems to share her sentiments that the march was, quote, just sort of amazing, all these people from all around the world coming together to help women. The further into the piece, the more cemented these ideas become, like in the fourth highlighted section, when she quotes the signs that marchers were carrying that display the range of opinions represented under the umbrella of the Women's March. In the fifth highlighted section, the hashtag #WhyIMarch is also given a little shout out with protesters' interviews and reasons for marching. In the sixth highlighted section, Gia really gives us a preview to her world when she writes about her pride and briefly mentions her positive emotional response while making a point to include the privilege and racism of white women. However, her personal opinion can best be seen in the seventh highlighted section, where she concludes her main point. The latter part of the sentence, all the people whose rights to self-determination are constantly under threat. She excludes her mention of straight, middle-class white women. This sentence solidifies Gia's nagging thought mentioned in the previous paragraph that intersectionality is to credit for the success of the Women's March, which is due to the generosity and courage of those constantly persecuted and discriminated against. While interpreting the author's possible biases and opinions, I had to factor in my own. I was initially taken aback when reading the eighth highlighted section. I thought, we need to talk about the uncomfortable things, especially when our president is blatantly unapologetic for such atrocities against all women everywhere. That white privilege everyone has been asking me and other white women to quote-unquote check? Well, there it was. Upon further consideration and much shame, I realized that the other minority groups we white women leading the Women's March asked to join and support us were constantly talking about uncomfortable subjects, such as immigration, racism, and fundamental human rights. Because of my white privilege, my strongest subconscious objection to Trump was for all the awful things he said about the average woman, and not about all the immigrants, the LGBTQ plus community, black men and women, Hispanic and Mexican individuals, and many more that supported the Women's March who are at the true disadvantage. My initial read-through left me thinking about the pink pussy hat a stranger gifted me the morning of the march, instead of reflecting on the real intent of the author, which was to point to the intersectional support as the reason for the success of the Women's March. This emotional reaction effectively altered my attention and perception for the first couple of read-throughs, but several more close readings and external research for content later, I was able to come to some conclusions. I am privileged, I am female, I am middle class, and I am heterosexual. These things can categorize me and define me to others, but I can and need to do better. Because I have not chosen these aspects of my identity for myself, I have a civic and moral duty to listen, empathize, and most importantly, support others. That pink pussy hat that was mentioned earlier was a broader part of a movement called the Pussy Hat Project that aimed to be inclusive of those who could not attend a Women's March. The Women's March on Washington's official policy paper lists their values and principles for why they march, and guess what? A short list of what is included is women's rights, police accountability, gender and racial equality, reproductive rights, and many more. All of these causes, supporters, and advocates came together to support women. A little extra research and information allowed me to really see the magnitude of the march and come to see what the author was really getting at with her main point. In the end, I still worry about my tainted perspectives of the world and what I can do to prevent being racist and bigoted. But in regards to the radical possibility of the Women's March, I think that I and many others need to keep in mind the ways that different women experience life. When you know you're the kind of woman who has always been prioritized, it can be difficult to realize there are different experiences.